Great, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erica Palmer, Community Development Director for the City of Troutdale. I'm glad that everybody could be here this afternoon. I first want to say thank you to our interview panel that's taking time in their afternoon to come and help us with this process, and to all of you, the development team on this RFQ proposal. Before we introduce ourselves and before I have you do your team's introduction, I just kind of want to tee it up here and talk about the Confluence site just a little bit, because we always have new faces that may be joining us online and getting caught up on this process. So as most of you know, the Confluence site has been an industrial site for over 100 years. It became part of the urban renewal area early in the 2000s, and then we went through a large cleanup of the site, which took several years to clean up the site from the industrial uses, from farm uses to agricultural uses, to the city's stormwater sewage treatment plants on that site. Here's the boundary. I don't know if many of you have been out to the site lately, but we are currently working on our 2-acre linear park adjacent to the Sandy River. We expect that to be complete by early this fall. It'll be such an amenity to the community, with access to downtown, access to the 40-mile loop, and access to the state parks across the I-84 pedestrian bridge. The site is adjacent to the Columbia Gorge Outlet Mall and to our existing downtown for those retail and commercial uses. So where we've been and where we're headed, I know our interview panel here, and I'm sure all of you have gone into the background materials and are really understanding the URA goals and objectives for the site. And kind of understanding some of the site constraints and opportunities at the same time. So the site is constrained by I-84, the Union Pacific Railroad, the Columbia Gorge Outlet Mall, but we can also capitalize on the location. Its proximity to the Outlet Mall and downtown, the Riverfront Park that's currently being built, and to the trails, and having that access to all the natural resources that surround the Troutdale community. So there really is that need to balance the site and the URA goals with the market realities that we're seeing today. In the region, we're seeing a high vacancy rate for office and commercial development within the metro region. And there's a lot of economic uncertainty too right now with federal administration policies that we're seeing. And I'm sure we're all aware of the housing crisis here in Oregon and in the metro region. That is currently being brought up and talked about in many discussions through different policies at the state and local level. So with these market realities and the concept of what the Confluence could look like, I think we're going to see it more residentially driven with a mixed use of commercial and residential buildings, townhomes, and possible live-work units. We are expecting the housing on that site to be market rate housing, and depending on unit types here in the metro region, we're seeing anywhere between 1,600 to over 3,500 for market rate rents. They'll most likely be residential on-site amenities for folks that live there, and for also the community as well, because we want people to come down there and visit the park and visit the uses as well. When we talk about commercial retail uses, we talk about kind of the smaller niche retail uses, maybe cafe, like outdoor outfitter, capitalizing on some of the natural resources that we have in the area. And of course, hospitality has been spoken to a lot. And I know we've talked about a lot of this in our town center advisory board meetings, and also at planning commission, and throughout boards and commissions at the city level. So where we are kind of in this process. So we published a RFQ in early February. We've been evaluating the proposal that we received. So we received one proposal in this process. We did talk to a couple of other folks that were interested in submitting, but they were, afraid of the market kind of reality at the moment. But tonight, this afternoon, I just really want to emphasize that we're not here to make a decision. We're here to listen. We're here to listen to their RFQ and their qualifications and the team that they've put together. And our Town Center Advisory Board will be meeting early next week to do a debrief and to make a recommendation to our urban renewal agency about how to move forward. So with that, I am going to, let's just go around the room here. So once again, Erica Palmer, Community Development Director.
Marley Boxer, the Economic Development Coordinator.
Matt Brown, I'm a consultant that the city's engaged to help them in this process.
Zach Andrews, City Councilman and one of the board directors for the URA.
Well, Mike McKeel, and odd enough, I'm a dentist, but I'm also a developer for 45 years. And I developed a 35-acre site that was all industrial, and it turned out pretty well down in Fairview. So if I can be a little bit of a help in making this go well, that's what I'm here for.
John Leamy, Troutdale City Council, and also on the URA board.
Will Knight, Chair of the Town Center Advisory Board.
Kenny Stephenson, Vice Chair of the Advisory Board and Chair of the Planning Commission.
Keep going. Corey Martin, Principal at Hacker Architects.
Bob Nato, Partner at Nato Development. Will Nato, Partner at Nato Development.
Paul Delvecchio, President of Ethos Development.
Rick Weckney, Director of Asset Management for Time Equities.
Anders Meyer, also with Ethos Development, and Vice President.
Vijay Daniel with Pyramid Construction, partner over there.
Ami Ziff with Time Equities, and I oversee our retail.
Also Grant Scott, also retail.
So with that, and we've allowed about a half hour to 45 minutes for a presentation.
Okay.
Oh, well, Corey's getting his slides together. First, thank you for having us. We have our whole team here in person. We brought everybody. You got an idea of what the groups were from the individual introductions. We have three different development teams here. Time is kind of a combination investor developer. They're also New York based. Ethos is working with them as a local development partner. And NATO is here specifically for the hotel component, hospitality component. Everyone will be integrated in how we design, how we plan, how we execute. But there's some specific roles within that on account of geography and area of expertise. Hacker is here as our design professional. They put together the proposal, all the massing studies, and anticipated to be our designer for the projects. And Bremick, as I'm sure many of you know, is founded in Troutdale, anticipated to be our contractor. So it's kind of the layout there of all the teams. I can go to the next slide, Corey. Here we'll go into each team a little bit more. First, our company. So Ethos Development, Portland-based company. We develop mostly multifamily and specifically in the Pacific Northwest, so between Portland and Seattle. Our buildings are extremely site specific, so we don't have a product that we bring to a site and try to make it fit. We tend to do more urban oriented buildings, and each one has a very distinct personality and design concept. That's what the term ethos is about. The buildings have an ethos. On the left there, it's a project called the Moraine in Tacoma. It was just recently given the Best Puget Sound Development Award by CoStar for 2024. Actually, bottom right as well, that's part of the lobby of that building. Top right is a building in Portland we built with Hacker. It has two 5-story atriums in it, extremely unique for a property of its size, 160 units. in tow with the Ethos platform, we have a management company which manages about 3,500 units of residential and 1 million square feet of office and retail, and a brokerage platform that does debt and equity placement and office brokerage. So it's kind of 120 people, almost entirely in the Portland metro area. So I'll pass it off. Next slide to Time.
Time Equities has been around since 1966. It's wholly owned by a gentleman. If you go on our website, you'll see him. His name is Francis Greenberger. He is still very much involved in the business. We all basically report to him one way or another. We are both an investment and a development company. On the investment side, we have approximately 44 million square feet of space scattered all over the United States, Canada, Netherlands, Italy, Germany, Scotland, England, and Anguilla. We are headquartered in New York City, Lower Fifth Avenue. We employ approximately 170 people, all of whom are at that location, except for about 5 or 6 who are at remote locations. Some in the Netherlands, Kansas City, Florida, other such places. We have approximately $1 billion to $1.2 billion worth of development in our pipeline at any point in time. Most of it is multifamily. The 2 largest projects we have underway right now are a 702 unit development in East Bay, San Francisco, and Antioch, 702 units. We also have a 2 building project under design in Boynton Beach, Florida, 845 units to be developed in 2 phases. We generally are like Ethos. I think that's one reason why we see eye to eye on this project, and that we try to go in and understand the environment in which we're building and try to design something that fits within the context of those environments, helps for the success of the project, and also helps on the economics as well. Thank you for letting us be here.
You don't want to do it? I'll take it. We're Nader Development. We're a Portland-based family real estate development investment business. I'm 3rd generation in the business. It started by my grandfather in the early 1960s, taking cash flow from import-export business and buying up cheap old buildings in Old Town and rehabbing them on the cheap and leasing them for the cheap. And that business grew organically throughout the years. I joined my father in 2008, and in 2015, we pivoted from primarily office and historic office into hospitality and found a new home there. I really enjoy developing hotels, investing in hotels. We built the Hampton Inn Suites in Hood River, which is shown in the lower right, and also the Lodge at Columbia Point in the Tri-Cities, which is another waterfront hotel, both on the Columbia River and the Hamptons, actually on the confluence, another confluence, the confluence of the Hood and Columbia Rivers in Hood River. We've also co-invest in hospitality projects with select partners across the Western US and Hawaii, and are just a latecomer to this team, but happy to have been considered and accepted onto the development team, and also excited and looking forward to exploring possibilities on the Confluence site.
Bremen Construction was formed in Troutdale in 2004, and we consider ourselves a local contractor to this area. We have lots of projects going on in Troutdale, one being right across the street. You can actually see it. And we're very active in Troutdale, and also we do have our yard still in Troutdale. We specialize in pretty much a wide variety of construction projects, multifamily, hospitality, and office buildings. And we're delighted to be included as part of this team and look forward to working with you all.
Hi, I'm Corey Martin from Hacker. We're a 45-person firm based out of Portland, and we practice all over the west of the US. We don't specialize in any one type of work. Whatever we do, we try and elevate the design quality on every project. We're kind of known for designing projects for really sensitive sites and landscapes and communities at places like Blackbeat Ranch near Sisters, the High Desert Museum, the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center. And whenever we approach an urban design project like this, we try and find ways to connect people to the landscape through the buildings that we're designing. So we're really excited to be here because we see this as an opportunity to design a community and a neighborhood that is all about connecting people to place and to this amazing landscape here. It's a really exciting opportunity. And at the same time, I get to work with some of my best clients and best partners. We've worked with Ethos and Bremick for years. Bremick is our go-to contractor whenever we have a choice. We always think about Bremick first. And Ethos is newer to us, but we've done some of our most innovative work with them. So it's a dream team, and we're really excited to be here. So you asked us to talk a little bit about vision for the site. And as you know, a lot of the vision that we presented was basically inspired by everything that you have talked about. And we know that there's a big process ahead of us to figure out what the vision will really truly become, and we're looking forward to it. So that said, we did kind of highlight 3 things that we thought were major opportunities here with this site, knowing what we know so far. And so those 3 things are, we think this is an opportunity to extend the experience of downtown Troutdale to the Confluence site. We think this is an opportunity to create a really great flexible space for the entire community. And again, an opportunity to connect to nature through everything that we're going to do here. When we say we want to extend the experience of downtown Troutdale, what we mean is that we think the scale and the feel of downtown Troutdale is really good. And we want to bring what's good about that to the Confluence site. We want to consider bringing the grid spacing and the size of the blocks to this site. We want to think about maybe extending those grid lines, those streets across the train tracks and into this site, whether it's just an alignment or literally a physical connection in the future. We know that there's been discussion of that at some point. We want to connect to that pathway, that pedestrian walkway that's already under construction from the end of downtown. And we want to connect this site to the outlet mall. There's a huge opportunity there to make sure that this site is connected and not just an island within all of these things. It's very unusual, as you all know. And then in the middle there, that kind of circle that we highlighted, I want to zoom in on that, because when we say we want to create space for community, we think there's an opportunity here to design a public gathering space or plaza that feels a little bit more urban than just park, something that is dense and feels like it has the energy of multiple retailers in one place. We talked about spreading the retail up and down the riverfront, but everybody on the team kind of agreed that it would be better if we could find the right way to create the right scaled space in the center of the site around the water tower. So all of the retailers here will get the benefit of being close to one another. There's that collective energy that develops when you do that. And a lot of projects like this kind of tend to sometimes make that open public space that's got to be flexible and can handle big events, right? But they tend to make it a little bit large. And so we've got to find that right balance. And so this is one idea and one kind of very preliminary vision for how that might start to feel. But you can have anchor retail, flexible open plaza, again, balancing that kind of ratio of hardscape and landscape in just the right way. And we got to figure out how to do that. So when we say connecting to nature, we think this is a chance to design the entire site so that people can be outside and enjoy that year round. As we all know, certain times of the year here in the spring, fall, and winter, the east wind comes. But a lot of times on those days, it's also sunny. So we think that we can design the outdoor spaces on the site to be protected from that east-northeast wind by the buildings themselves. And so the yellow areas on here kind of start to show some of those locations. So we can have wind-protected, south-facing outdoor space that's useful year-round. We can place amenity space on the roofs of all the buildings along the riverfront so that people get those access to views whenever possible. We can consider how some of the townhome blocks might have a pocket park in the middle that's also wind-protected. The good thing about this idea of wind protection coming from that north-northeast is that it also offers sound protection, which is great. Because as we know, 84 is not a little bit of sound coming in our direction. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Paul to talk a little bit about differentiating the design.
Yeah, I think all 3 developers here and our designer, and to the extent that they can control it, our contractor, cares very much about how our projects affect the community, not just the residents. And differentiating a project, and there's so many aspects to it. Materiality is one way that we've used. I mean, top right is a building that we worked on with Hacker called Brooklyn. And the facade is not, there's not a ton of movement in it. There's very subtle movement in it. There were some very, very intentional choices made as to how we used ordinary materials to make the building feel special. Employing that kind of thought, sort of, stitch in time sort of thing, really goes a long way. How you site a building, what different topologies you use. Like this building here is it's both a wood frame building and it's a podium, and kind of merge those two things together to get a great outcome. Another concept here that was used on that building was breaking the building down into various parts to, what would otherwise be a very long facade. So the massing was broken down to make it feel like several different projects as you drive or walk by it. So there's an example of a thoughtful implementation to differentiate a building from what's around it, make it feel special while still not being something that stands out in a negative way. So, how that might look here. So we have various buildings shown, and they're at various scales. Some of these buildings.
It's a really good microphone.
Sorry, continue.
It's just some of the buildings that you see there, and we've looked at a different rendering, it'll be more apparent. Some of them are 3-story walk-ups, and some of them are podiums that have retail under them. And the idea is to create differentiation of design. The roof lines will be different in those types of buildings. The ground floor experience will be different in those types of buildings. The opportunities for amenities will be different, and the price points will be different. So you'll have kind of various architectural opportunities within the site, and you'll have various opportunities as a tenant, and you'll interact with them differently as a passerby or community member visiting the site for a walk or a coffee or to buy something if there's a retail space. But the short here is that everything in red is multi-story multifamily. We move on to the next one. Townhomes. Several of the blocks have townhomes, either work-live or pure townhome. We would envision these to be rental. The example that we have here as a time equities project might be worth handing over, and you can talk about it, Rick.
We, through a competitive process, were awarded a full block development opportunity in downtown Brooklyn in about 2004. The intent was always to be mixed use. The block literally is at the intersection of a residential area, and if you think of New York City, you think of brownstones with stoops. So on the south end of this full block development site were old brownstones with stoops, transitioning to, on the north side of this development site, literally downtown Brooklyn. So we put together a plan to create townhouses, 23 exactly, on the southern end of the full block development, so that would serve as a transition point between these old brownstones with stoops and fit into the neighborhood very nicely with the design that we did, and then transition on the north side of the site to commercial uses, to blend in with the commercial uses literally across the street. So this was a site that we started development of in 2007 and finished in 2014, and it was a very successful development project. Then the other site is a site in Lolita, which is in Manhattan. Believe it or not, St. Patrick's Church didn't always used to be where it is today. This was the old St. Patrick's Church site, and the convent is what you see here. So we converted the old convent and the grounds where the priests stayed to a combination of townhouses and condos. And we literally just sold our last unit about a year and a half ago. And this was a project where we promised the church that we would do an architectural design that would be fitting for the character of the building. And we literally used the structure without very little exterior alteration except for glass. And it's a very, very successful project of understanding the market, in this case, which included the Catholic Church, and the need to be sensitive to the architectural design elements that were fitting within the Lolita community. So both very successful projects, which are examples of what could be here.
So looking at kind of the, the orientation of the townhomes, I think again, with the multifamily and the mixed use idea, a lot of the ideas to kind of generate that nexus of activity and push that, as close to the river and the park infrastructure that the city's created as possible, so that in that kind of, mixed public-private domain, really everyone's getting to participate in that experience of the river, those retail and commercial spaces. And so when we look at kind of the townhomes and where they lay out, kind of fitting them in a little behind that so that it has more of this kind of private residential feel. Again, Corey mentioned kind of the scale of the blocks and really picking that up from the existing fabric of the town and kind of bringing that down in so that that scale kind of repeats, looking at the way that they're arranged on the blocks again, to create some of these smaller spaces that do have more of the kind of private orientation that residents can use and have a little separation there. One of the other things that we've really looked at is this kind of light version of a main street that connects to that retail commercial nexus at the plaza, but also just helps kind of create the experience of entering the site. So looking at the live-work typology in those locations to give it again like a little bit more of that kind of downtown Main Street feel. So maybe smaller service professionals or something like that that could utilize those spaces. And just kind of like build that connection to the plaza that's a little bit more of kind of the retail focus. And then obviously, parking is always a consideration, but attempting to really manage that successfully so that it's accommodating the needs on the site, accommodating the needs of the residents, the short-term users, and all that, and really finding ways to like mix that in with the townhouse development to create some edges and that walkable feel.
Yeah, key to this, around the plaza area that Corey had mentioned, so from the water tower forward towards the river and then adjacent to the park that we had shown, that's where we envisioned kind of having a commercial nexus. So you might have some, soft goods retailers, things like that. We also envisioned, importantly, dining. So there's a reason for people to go there. There's a reason people to walk there and visit. The image on the bottom left is a market hall in Bend that Hacker designed. Very successful. It's not huge. Something like that could be here, where you have multiple vendors at a small scale, with communal, kitchen, communal dishwashing, things like that. The top is Black Butte Ranch. Small market, same sort of thing could exist. The volume on this site might support a small market on its own with the number of residents we're talking about. The idea is to bring all this into one area where it feels concentrated, where you feel the energy of other people rather than having it spread out around the site. And what Anders mentioned about the live work is creating a path where there is some commerce all the way through, so you don't feel like you're just driving into somebody's neighborhood that's built specifically for them, that it is a place that's open for the community, that it's not sort of a walled off residential campus. This sort of articulates that as the kind of pass-through idea in the outlet center, flanking what would be the new drive. There's shown an idea of additional retail that there are some hoops to jump through, and time can address that a little bit later, but it's an idea to sort of continue what we envisioned in the site, which is the live work flanking your entry path. And then as you move forward towards the site, you're kind of drawn in by the river, so that sight line is left intentionally open, so that you're seeing through the site to the river the whole time. You're also near some sort of commerce the whole time. Anders mentioned parking. We tried to park it such that the residents would be parking internal to blocks and visitors would be parking on, street parking, possibly a parking garage. There were some calculations done, I don't know them off the top of my head, but generally we feel like this volume of development could be adequately parked. And then you'll see where there is a kind of an L shape, that's retail fronting on the plaza that has the water tower on it. So that the kind of public space is sort of an L of its own that starts at the water tower and then kind of turns into that park plaza area with retail on various fronts of it. So that whole area could also accommodate, things like outdoor concerts or other things that the city might put on collaboratively with the property ownership that would both serve residents but also draw other community members in, have a reason to be here.
I'll take this, Will.
Yeah.
And of course, these aren't quite the right pictures, except for the one in the lower right is the Hampton Inn that we built in Hood River. And if you, I guess the process this hotel development, you break the hotels into flagged hotels and independents. To get an independent hotel financed requires some very unconventional financing right now. We want to take a hotel to the bank, it's got to be flagged, which means we need a franchise. We're kind of at a similar time with when we built the Hampton about 2015-16. We mixed conventional financing with Umpqua Bank with some unconventional financing from a group of Chinese investors who wanted their green cards. And we designed the hotel with a hotel architect, and then took our architect from Portland, who's done a lot of other buildings in Hood River, and said, we have the hotel, fix it, because we didn't want to build another EFS-covered Hampton with the lighting around the parapet. And so Mark put it with a brick and stained cedar siding, and then we took that to the city and got it through their planning commission and their design review, and then we took it to Hilton and said, hey, if we want to build a hotel in Hood River, it's got to look like this, because they don't like your hotel. It wasn't that we didn't like it, it's that Hood River approved a completely different design. So that's a very unique Hampton in the world of 55 or 6,000 Hampton Inns. And it's in the top 5% of the Hamptons in the whole chain worldwide. So we're really proud of that. The one at the top is a 4-star. It's the only 4-star independent hotel in the Tri-Cities in Richland, Washington. And it was done with a partner of mine, Tom Drumheller, who's since passed away, but Tom was the first manager of the Stephanie Inn in Cannon Beach, and then did the Ocean Lodge. And he was from Walla Walla, and he wanted to do a hotel, so this is his personal vision of what a boutique hotel should look like. And it's wine themed, so every room is named after a different winery in the market, and we have a fabulous wine cellar. And we opened without a restaurant, and we thought we'd have a wine bar. Well, then we found out in Washington State, it's not like the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. You have to have a full menu in order to sell liquor. And so we had a wine restaurant, and the only thing we could do is give away wine at wine tastings. And so we converted the lobby and the ground floor into a restaurant. And we've worked really hard over about 5 years. And now, you watch in this industry, guest satisfaction is like It gets scored daily, and it's kind of what you score your manager and staff on. And so we've got Open Table, we're 4.7, which has taken us 5 years to get to. We have a new chef, and it's a fabulous menu. And so we can go in either direction. And it's going to depend on work that we haven't done yet, that we will do to develop a market study and talk to the brands and see what kind of a hotel they would give us a franchise for, and then talk to our partners in some of these other hotels that are not branded and see if they're interested in participating. But I will say, the things that you think are not good about that location up against the freeway, our Hampton is up against the freeway in almost the exact same distance. And believe me, we've spent a long time figuring out how to deal with the noise issues and the sound coming off the freeway. And the other thing is, we're on the right side of the freeway with this location. The Hampton is on the north side, and so it has its L shape facing in the opposite direction. And this way we can get south facing and get away from the wind, which we know from Hood River is pretty key. So we're excited. And one thing for the development team to know is we built an office building, 30,000 square feet, next to the Hampton. And the city let us share the parking ratio between the two, because if you've ever been to a hotel and you look out in the parking lot, by 9 o'clock in the morning, 90% of guests are doing whatever they're doing, if it's windsurfing or hiking, or if they've got a meeting with a client, they're gone, and they're gone until 4 or 5 o'clock. So you can, if there are restaurant customers or retail customers, we'll share the parking. That will help with your parking requirement. Will, do you want to add anything?
I think you got it.
Okay, so I'm going to hand it to Paul and Anders to talk a little bit about the kind of important high-level process with the outreach, and then I'll talk about the more detailed.
Yeah, so I mean, I think recognizing both like the importance of the site within the town and the future of the town, and also understanding kind of its prominence along the freeway, the existing businesses in town, and our desire to kind of find a mix that really supports what already exists here, allows for growth, and fills out kind of the picture of town rather than competing with what's already here. I think the community engagement portion of this is going to be very critical. We have, on previous projects, worked on that in a number of different ways, and generally speaking, all of it involves, at the very basic level, listening, and doing it in a kind of structured and engaged way, so that we can really help understand the needs and desires of the various users in town, whether it's just residents who may be passing along on the trail, or the business community, even visitors who are coming through occasionally, but really helping to kind of focus their input so that it can meaningfully shape the site. There are a lot of, in kind of urban contexts where we get neighborhood involvement, it often tends to be a general reactionary concern about parking. I'm not going to have any parking in front of my house anymore. Whatever it is, people come in with preconceived notions, and I think our goal is really to understand where those circumstances exist, but help shape that into something that can actually help influence the project positively and develop what we want. So some of the resources that we've used on other projects are working with PSU's Center for Public Interest Design, and helping, they have kind of a framework that they use for engagement. Some of the components of that involve mapping, so working with residents to understand, what key areas already exist in the community, you know, what places they go to on a daily basis. You know, whether it's at one of these last presentations, we just had a large map of the community on the wall, and people would come up and mark, here's my house, like here's where I take my kid to school, this is where they go for after school activities, I work here. And you start to see kind of this web of different connections within the town, places that are highlighted, places where there is an activity and more could come, and start to get a sense that allows you to fill in. Some of the other tools that we've used were looking at some of those considerations that people are concerned about, whether it's the type of housing that's going in. Sometimes there are really strong feelings about affordable housing, or you know, general market rate housing in both directions. Often strong feelings about parking, open space, like all these different components that can make up a site at this scale. And so one of the activities that we used was basically taking kind of a ranked choice voting system and allowing people to engage with that. So we had different cups out, you know, representing each of the these different kind of key components of a development, and giving people different colored Legos to basically be able to vote and prioritize, like, this is super important to me. And it was not just a voting and tallying exercise. We were also there, like, engaging with people and understanding, like, why is it that is the most important thing to you, and really finding out interesting information about, I mean, both their lives and their community, and kind of how they're engaging and hoping to use, or like these opportunities for growth. So that's kind of one framework. I think, you know, the other is very direct engagement with the existing business community in the town. I think that there are a lot of businesses that have become really successful here, helped establish some kind of gravity and interest and momentum in Troutdale. And I think that those are great resources for us to connect with, to really understand, like, what opportunities there are for growth. And obviously, you know, to consider that the goal here is not to compete with the established businesses. So are there ways that we can kind of further support them, bring more traffic in that benefits the entire town, or filling in a niche that is kind of missing? And I think looking at some of the organizations, so engaging with the Chamber of Commerce, things like that. And then I think the other main foundational component of this is really figuring out where can we plug in a way that engages the community easily. So looking at the Fridays, the farmers markets, setting up like over at the library, and other places where people in the community already are, offering an opportunity to come out and engage, and you know, really meeting them where they're at. In addition to, you know, potentially holding very specific meetings, but those tend to be a little harder for people to come to, or like find out about, or whatever. So really finding ways to get to them and reducing kind of the barrier to entry.
I think you covered it all. I think one thing maybe we want to just talk about is that you already have a great asset in the website, the Confluence website that you've created. And it's going to be a great place to present the vision so that people can see on their own time what has been done, and see how their input has impacted the project before any work begins. Okay.
This is a project schedule. Grain of salt here, because there's a lot of things that could unfold differently. But in broad strokes, we've held 2 months up front in yellow for managing the relationship between our team and the city. You know, 50% for negotiation and 50% for developing the DDA. And given what you all do, I'm sure you know that could take more time, but you know, we left 2 months. Following that, we have development of a site plan and public engagement running concurrently. And, you know, ideally there'd be arrows in there pointing back to each other, because those two things relate to one another. So, you know, we'll make steps forward on one, work on the other, and so on. Whether that is 2 months or more, probably depends on what time of year we're doing it and when we can schedule events and things like that. There are, some legal structure elements of this. The way we've designed this, there's some of the property would be dedicated back to the city and others would be, private blocks. So there'd certainly be a subdivision element. So we'd have to work on that, concurrently to our design. So that's the first of the 3 longer green arrows. And we have infrastructure and vertical development separate, infrastructure being things that happen on the public roads. So the roads themselves, curb, gutter, sidewalks, drainage, power, gas, all the stuff, services for the building, and vertical being the buildings themselves. So we have the design period running concurrently and permitting together following that construction. Realistically, the vertical development would just cascade because, as you'll see in the following slide, there's a phasing approach. So we wouldn't design everything up front. We would design only the phase 1 up front, and then, or phase A, and then kind of move on from there. We have A, B, and C in here. I guess A, B, and C is their subcomponents of phase 1, with the largest of the multi-buildings flanking the Water Tower Plaza and the hotel in phase 1, or A1A. B and C would be sort of a fast follow. So I think more, permitted together, but maybe construction moves from one to the next as the sub finishes excavation on A, they move to B. As they finish B, they move to C. But in general, what's shown in red is considered to be our first phase. This is the largest of the multi-buildings combined with the hotel. Let's go to phase 2 before we loop VJ in.
Yeah, so phase 2 is just everything else.
Okay, so VJ, maybe you want to talk about the sort of technical component of those phases.
Yeah, basically what we had kind of figured out is the way we phase it should allow us to be efficient on the back end too. So we wanted to phase it in such a way that we're closer to the river and working back instead of starting from this side and going to the river. Obviously, some of the considerations we really have to look at is the traffic flow that during construction, because during that construction of phase 1, we only have one kind of entry point to it. So we will have, that needs to be developed first. And that's why we have that whole grid line developed. So once we finish the construction of these buildings, there's a way for people to go outside and be able to mitigate traffic that way. During construction, obviously, there are a few things that we have to be very careful about. We are on the river, so anything construction related needs to be, we have to take care of stormwater pollution prevention plan, making sure that, whenever the construction activities are happening, that's not carried out into the river. And at the same time, also make sure that that trail is going to be open. So making sure that there's a good separation between what we're doing and the people, making sure that people are able to enjoy that amenity while we are creating dust and noise and all that kind of stuff that nobody likes till we finish. So we figured that by doing this, we kind of get the best of both worlds. We kind of start clean, get the infrastructure done, and then we're off the river and to the back. So that kind of makes sense to us from construction kind of thinking and also from how the development works.
One other note on phasing is absorption. So, think about a car lot. If you go to a car lot and there's, 100 white F-150s and you were looking for anything different, you're going to leave from the car. If they had all the same thing, they would be taking a really long time to sell their trucks. So they carry 25 different versions of a car instead. So they have better put through. We have the same thing. So we want to make sure that when we're building variety, and we're building it so that it releases in stages so that we can absorb and are not left with a bunch of vacancy up front. So staggering construction is part of that strategy. So you can stagger based on topology. So you have different kinds of inventory coming online at different times. And staging it so that you don't have 400 units at one moment. and you're trying to lease through them. So maybe you only get 150 and then you get another 150 3 or 4 months later. It's really an important economic consideration, because having finished vacant units is not a great outcome. You'd rather not start if you know you're going to be competing with yourself down the line. So a good seg into financial considerations. So there were a few notes in the questions about financial considerations. One was about infrastructure funding and how we anticipate funding the infrastructure. There was a mention of TIF, which is something that is going to be key here to getting this infrastructure funded. We'll also be looking for state funds to the extent that we can find them. Those come and go at various times for various reasons. So keeping a keen eye on what is available when, and trying to lobby for, actually I think it just happened, an infrastructure bill last week. So annually keeping up on that to try to get appropriations for this site. That would be a collaborative effort with the city. So we would be applying together. And enlisting the state level politicians that represent this area. We would likely also be looking in general, we could apply it for infrastructure, the SDC credits are another way to think about it, rather than putting money into a general fund, putting it into the site infrastructure itself. Positive, do we anticipate a positive residual land value is another question. It's a tough one to answer in the absolute at this moment, since there's a bunch of steps necessary to figure out exactly what's going to be built. So if we're taking public engagement seriously and are open-minded about what the outcome could be based on that process, it's hard to say exactly what it is and then model it exactly. I can say that it is a hard moment for land. You don't see a lot of land sales in general because the cost of construction has gone up and rents have stagnated over the last couple of years in this area. Things change with time, but both of those things kind of run against land value because it's sort of the first cost. But it is something that we can work on transparently and collaboratively as we move through early underwriting and present what our opinion is on the land based on underwriting. I think the factors that would go into it are worth pointing out. This is a market rate, privately financed development that requires money. The money comes in two forms. There's debt, a lender of some kind, bank, insurance company, then equity, and both of those come at a cost. So we need to make sure that the project can earn enough to support that investment. So that's from our situation, as sponsors, that's what we'll be looking at, is the result of what we have designed and its economic viability and good enough to support that kind of investment. And the land value can sort of be a flexible gasket under that, almost like a remainder. So that's kind of the process we'll be going through, and we'll work with the city on what we think that'll be as we get a little further down the road. Another question was, are we open to terms other than a fee simple interest? I think we are flexible with the eventual outcome becoming fee simple interest, but it eventually has to land there. So there could be an interim step to get us there. But ultimately, we want fee simple interest in the inside part of the box with dedication on the infrastructure. I think that's it for this slide. If there's any other, yeah, some of that there were some terms of art in there, and maybe some stuff that was a little financy. So if in the questions you want to talk about that more, we're happy to.
Sorry, can you back up to the phasing slide really quick so that we can take a look at that a little bit more. So I know this isn't a question that's on the sheet and whatnot,
Sure.
but you mentioned that everything else is phase two. I think there's some questions about what the impacts the outlet mall and the road being shown through the outlet mall. Is that indicated for phase two? Or is there other things that need to be determined prior to being able to say with any certainty on that?
Do you want to handle the?
Yeah, there's a moment in time now where we have an opportunity because the mortgage is coming due first quarter of next year on the outlet center. So there's a moment where some of the building, to the extent this all came together, could be released and not encumbered by that mortgage and be excluded from a new mortgage. That's a moment in time. And so we've all come in here to have this discussion because there is an opportunity which has not presented itself up to this point. We've had a 10-year fixed rate mortgage that encumbers the whole site and won't be here once we refinance the property. We're gonna have to pay back the mortgage, get a new mortgage on the property. In terms of the timing could be as soon as we can come to terms on the details, the specifics about how that would work.
Thank you.
So probably phase one is the short answer, if you take that in combination with
The timeline.
all
that
the
you
other
presented,
timelines,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's just helpful to understand the constraints and opportunities that exist
Sure.
for that, so. Was that the end of the presentation?
Yep, we're done.
Okay.
We can kick it back to you
Great.
for questions.
Great. So we can move into the next phase of this interview where we have a couple of conversational questions that we will go around the table and ask you. Tammy Steffens will be kicking us off.
I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it, so thank you for doing that. And you've answered some of this, but what challenges do you anticipate in developing the site and bringing your vision to life? And how do you plan to address those challenges, and what support do you envision from the city?
I can grab it first. I mean, it's a hard moment to develop anything. There's just economic headwinds. I think the macroeconomic climate is probably the hardest thing about this at the moment. And that just comes down to money, right? Finding money at the right price. And how the city can play a role, and I think part of it is, actual financial support, is one way, or reduction of costs. Some of the costs that go into this are controlled by the city, at least in part. I think also being a teammate and a cheerleader and helping us sell this vision. Just showing how supportive a municipality does matter to potential partners, potential lenders. Going into something where the municipality is hostile, that situation exists, and that is its own headwind. And I don't think that's what this is. I think this is truly collaborative, and continuing that into the execution phase is going to be helpful. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
Well, I just would add, just an example, a current example is we're developing a hotel, boutique hotel, with Acker as the designer in downtown Lake Oswego. And we're back to our sort of interesting financing, unconventional financing, because there is still, if you can believe it, a strong, we think, market in China from Chinese families who want to invest in the US and thereby get the family to Greenwood. And so we're out trying to raise money. And the most important thing that they need in China to give credibility to the project is a government official writing a letter in support. And so the mayor of Lake Oswego is writing us a letter that then will go into the due diligence material. And basically, it's a little disingenuous, because the reason it works is because in China, if a government official says, we're going to do this, by God, they do it. And so they put a lot of credence just in that letter. And so that kind of support from the city, I mean, that's an example of how that works in our world to find money.
Can I add one small thing? This is mainly when you go in from design to construction, depending on jurisdictions where you have, 9, 12 months stuck in permit. And the one way to really speed up the project or process is be able to be open to working together on how that permit is laid out, whether we could get a civil permit and a foundation permit or a phase permit, so that allows us to keep going, the design to go just ahead of construction, so we're not having this long wait time. That helps us where, with the development team, that they're not holding, paying interest on a construction loan, that shrinks the timeline, and that pretty much helps everyone on this side of the table.
Said in a slightly different way, when interest rates were low and construction costs were low, you needed fewer tools in your tool chest. Now you need more tools in your tool chest, and they're not always available.
I think the second question here is kind of teasing that out a little bit more. How has the current market environment shaped these plans? And do you foresee any more potential market changes over the projected timeline that was presented that might influence the strategy or change it in some way?
I don't think we've changed is that when we submitted last time, I think we were at the tail end of a bull market, and now we're probably turning the corner, from the trough perhaps of, I hope we are, kind of a slow economic moment. We haven't changed the plan very much, and I think part of the reason is that you haven't changed your asks very much. So we wanted to put forward what we thought the best planning and architectural solutions were to the desires, and frankly, we agree with the desires for the site. We think that that's the right mix. Costs of everything have dramatically changed in the interim. So, it's a headwind back to, was it Kenny or Danny? I don't, or your question, yeah. So we haven't changed our plan very much. I think how the financing looks will change. I think that the change in engineering will be financial engineering, not literal engineering. So I don't know if time guys have anything to add there.
I think that's an accurate statement.
Concur.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question's got a couple of parts to it. It's regarding home ownership. Will you be developing ownership housing directly or selling parcels to home builders? And if home builders, how will you ensure high-quality development from third-party builders?
At present, we're not planning on disposing of any of it in any way, be it to build properties to homeowners or parcels to home builders. Is it we're envisioning it all being built by this team and for rent. I suppose that is probably open to change. I think a for sale townhouse product is possible, but we're not there yet on underwriting.
Is it accurate to say that for sale townhomes are more likely than for sale condos?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think anyone here would want to do a condo building, a vertical ownership outcome. There's a lot of reasons for that. Mainly a 10-year condo liability law requirement.
Can I just ask you a quick follow-up on that? So there's some changes going through the legislature right now, and they're trying to kind of loosen that up. Would that change your outlook at all, or are there still other kind of barriers to that?
Yeah, I've been following that loosely, and this is sort of a bit of a tangent, but I don't think that they're changing it enough. I mean, if they're changing it with the basis that 10 years was reasonable, right? And it's just not a big enough change to attract meaningful condo development.
Thanks.
Okay, and the next part is how are current interest rates impacting ownership housing market, and do you expect any changes that could affect your
I don't know that I have an answer to that. Do you guys know? Yeah. I don't think any of us are residential developers. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think the market has slowed down a little bit from what I read in the news, and people have to get mortgages just like we have to get commercial financing. So I'd imagine it has made it harder. But there are also places where inventory is moving pretty fast. Like Bob mentioned, like Oswego, that still moves pretty well because it's desirable, and maybe this would be too. But I don't think we're prepared to speak to that because we don't sell directly to homeowners very often. I think time has done it in some instances.
Only very rarely and not recently. Not recently enough to be able to comment on
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got a question on the commercial component of this, and I might add, even though I don't live in Gresham, I'm the chairman of the Design Commission Review Commission for the City of Gresham. And we'd kill to have a good project like this come before us, so I want to compliment you for what you've done. But my question here is, have your views on the type and amount of retail that would succeed here, how have they evolved? And beyond eateries, breweries, and other retail, light industrial, or maker use spaces, what could work on this site?
The short answer to that is that the answer we would give you today is gonna change by the time the buildings are built and ready. And if you think about where outlets were 10 years ago to where they are today, they look a lot different. And just living through COVID, the retail landscape looks totally different. Tariffs are throwing another wrench in that. So it's hard to predict what might work here, but surely people want to gather in a town center and eat and drink something, right? That's a focal point, and there's got to be some sort of an F&B component to it. Beyond that, the ancillary retail, I think, would likely be service businesses.
Yeah.
There's ample space in front of this development for soft goods uses, and if I had to guess today, it's some combination of service businesses.
Yeah, one thought I think is important is, in several urban renewal projects, both in Gresham, East County here and in Portland, the retail or commercial portions of that have struggled many times. And how would your project be designed and made to have that struggle not be part of your success?
Sure. Oftentimes you see those as a consumer driving by those, you see those and experience those struggling because they're in at the wrong basis and they can't afford to rent space for a certain rent per square foot as the market changes. So part of our whole approach is trying to be flexible and being able to be flexible whether the market's up for sales or down for sales and up for rentals. You have to be able to be flexible and to be nimble. So I think approaching this with the right financial structure to make sure that we're successful will address that. Because at some point, if you have developed at the right basis, you could give space away and keep it vibrant if you had to. But if you were in for a basis in economics that did not allow you to do that, then you'd have mass vacancy.
You want to have good businesses and you want to be full.
We sure do.
Okay.
So on that note, what other strategies do you guys have as far as a plan to recruit commercial businesses to your site? And would you like the city to be involved in that process?
Yeah, we'd be happy to have the city involved. And I think we'd be, on the development team reaching out directly. I mentioned kind of on the first slide, Ethos Development sister company is a brokerage company. We have a retail team. Mm-hmm. We might not even be the broker for this, but a retail broker would be involved. We will be involved. There are businesses we've worked with in the past that we've developed for or sold buildings to that we know work well and we know have good vision. We'd start there, then you get introduced to other people and so on. So I think we'd start that early on to try to bring in partners that can kind of co-create vision and identity with us. And I think the city would be a great partner there because I'm sure that there are folks that want to be in Troutdale that you've talked to. And they want to be in Troutdale but for something. So what is the but for and how can we help solve it together? So I think it's a good opportunity to collaborate, and kind of back to the first question of what obstacles are there. I don't really see finding retailers as an obstacle in general because we're going to create something pretty unique. It's not just another corner in Portland. I think when you think about struggling retail, in my mind, it often happens because of a zoning requirement that required retail when the neighborhood community didn't really need another retail spot. I think this does, and the town can support it, so it's a different circumstance.
Can I add one more
Yeah,
thing? I mean, one of the things, it goes back to what Mike was talking about and how to have occupancy. One of the things that during COVID, coming out of COVID, Beaverton did was, offer restaurants some incentives to move down to Beaverton, and a lot of people took up on them on it. And those are some of the things that the city could help with. Maybe it's an initial, if it's a first generation, maybe waive some of the permit fees or some of those things, or give a grant for someone that's local to move to this space. So help them set up. I mean, if the first generation space comes in, then it'll be easier for the second generation space to also kind of fill in. So, it goes with the community engagement. As we're doing the community engagement, that could be also a story that the city is saying, hey, when you do come in and when you're leasing it, we can do this for you on the permit basis. We can do a fast permit review. We can waive some of these permit fees, or all these kind of things could be on the table to help the initial lease up.
The biggest challenge to getting a restaurant deal done is who's gonna pay to build the restaurant. So the development agreement we would have in our budget would have dollars allocated to make it a restaurant. Once it's built as a restaurant, it's a lot easier to find someone to show up and cook than it is to find them show up and go raise money and then cook and get a return on their investment.
And that's what Beaverton kind of did with helping them, and that's kind of what we're talking about.
And I think another component of this, that we started off kind of talking about the assets of the site, and is finding ways to lean into that to really continue to just pull traffic to this area. So obviously, the city's invested in the waterfront trail. I know that there are other investments planned for bike infrastructure and, supporting those like recreational activities that people are already coming out this area to engage in. And I think that there are ways that this development can really tie into that, support that, so some of these service businesses may be related to biking, or just like, fitness generally tied into, some of that infrastructure on the waterfront. And really like allowing businesses a kind of unique opportunity to engage with that through fitness and recreation that start to build, these kind of ancillary uses that, you do that, like you start off with your coffee and then you go to yoga and then you stay for lunch and like whatever that case is, but really, helping to kind of find businesses that work synergistically so that we can kind of develop that nexus that we're designing architecturally.
Okay. Sorry to back up just 1 sec. I think we skipped a pretty important question regarding the ownership housing and versus rental. I know that the preference would be for 100% rental. How open are you to discussing the percentage of rental versus home ownership?
Totally open to discussing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that question.
No, that's okay.
My sheet.
So this is going to the hotel. And I just want clarification, do you manage your own hotels or do you hire third party?
We hire management companies.
Yeah.
Actually, the one at Jackson Hole is sort of self-managed by partners, but generally we use two One is Merite, that's based in Eugene. It does the Hampton, and we've got 8 years of experience with. And the other is Columbia Hospitality out of Seattle, and they specialize in boutique independent hotels, primarily in the Northwest, but they're in California and they're moving east. So they're both local, you know, they're both Northwest companies, and that way I don't get the calls.
Got it.
That they're stuck in the elevator.
So in terms of the hotel, I guess, who do you see as being the target market for this hotel? Who's the visitor that you're targeting here? And do you have a sense right now of, is this limited service? Is this full service, boutique, independent? You know, I know you talked about, you know, obviously getting a brand on board is important.
Maybe, I mean,
Yeah.
we haven't decided because we haven't really delved into it. We do a lot of research and also we talk to a lot of people about it, but just to, because Hood River is kind of a similar market, although it's farther into the gorge, but we have you'd expect a large leisure customer base, which we have. What's surprising is we do a lot of group and corporate business, and we do Providence Hospital, Boeing, which used to be in situ, the Forest Service, there's some government business. So it's really a nice split, and it's actually leisure really is seasonal, so that corporate business, a lot of it is we do contract and kind of carry us through the winter. And then I think it'd be very similar here.
You anticipate then having like facilities on site at in this location to support conferences, group business, things like that?
Probably not, just because it's so heavily leisure, and I mean, maybe because there's some wedding venues in the gorge, we do a lot of business like that with people who, we'll get business here for people that are getting married in the gorge and they can't find rooms, which happens all the time all summer.
Yeah.
But not a conference center.
I think there's a part of this, the question too, is time this stage of development. It seemed like you're in like phase one, so you would see that as being part of the first phase of development.
Yes.
I mean, the trend here locally in Portland has been stagnation or decline in room rates, not just in downtown, but in the city of Portland plus. If you look at the Travel Portland numbers, since 2022, ADR is down. Occupancy is starting to creep up, but you know that we've been kind of stagnant. Do you see that changing, or is that?
I'm not sure I agree with that. We've got sort of friends that operate hotels, suburban hotels, and particularly we've got the one in downtown Beaverton, and then out in Newburgh, and I mean the Hampton's back to where it was, but it's better than 2019.
In Hood River.
I mean, in Hood River. Yeah. But so it's if you're talking downtown Portland, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
But I think the suburban markets, and those are a little bit different because a lot of them are business and corporate. And I think the traffic, I mean, probably the most important thing is the traffic counts on the 84. And from what I can see, driving out to Hood River, it's getting busier.
Highly visible, and it's the first thing you see coming out of the gorge, right? So, yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions or points that you wanted to address? Topics you wanted to bring up? Any questions for us?
I guess timeline on your end, you had started with some steps. Was there a timeline associated with it?
So moving forward right now, so after this interview process, our Town Center Advisory Board will meet next week and kind of debrief on this process. And they will make a recommendation to our urban renewal agency about how to proceed. And that meeting will be held in mid-June, and we'll keep you abreast of that meeting and any packet materials and whatnot. So we'll have an answer about how we're gonna formally proceed
by mid-June.
Great, all right, thank you. I think that's it.
Any other questions? That's it. Well, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
thank
We
you.
appreciate all of you being here in person and to our interview panel too. Thanks for spending time with us this afternoon and taking time out of your busy day. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.